Hello, thank you very much for coming to my little chat about psychology and report design. I'm just going to go through a couple of things in the next 20 minutes, basically how your brain works, how your brain functions, how to apply it to some design tips. Also, I'll be talking about abstraction, basically how you understand and relate to numbers, and that's probably the biggest message I'd like you to take away, because I see quite a number of people talk about report design, but they don't talk about how you relate to numbers. Any questions, just stick your hand up. Right, yeah, so a little bit about me. That's me here. So, yeah, I'm John Lunn. I'm a senior consultant in the data engineering group at Avanade. Infrequent Twitter, there's my blog. These slides will be available on my blog about an hour after this session. There's LinkedIn, and if you want to email me, it's john@johnlunn.com. No H in my name, don't email the other John Lunn. There is another John Lunn who is MVP, Johnny Bits. He gets all my mail and I get all his messages. I'm also an organiser for Data Relay, conference in October. This session came out of my previous role where I did a lot of Power BI training. And time again, I go and deliver the training, and then they create some reports, and I come back a few weeks later, how you been getting on? They've got like a report with garish fluorescent pink and visuals and pie charts all over the place. And you think, well, let's figure out how your brain works and how best to leverage your visualizations. So you've probably come across the two books, probably the leaders about visualization design, Showing Numbers by Stephen Few, also Storytelling with Data by Cole Knafleck. Those two books are pretty much the same in content and structure. I think Cole's book is a little bit more accessible, just goes you through visualization design, best practices, how best to show data effectively. Both of them talk about the psychological process, but it's like a little paragraph. It doesn't really go into how your brain actually works. Well, I'll take a step back and show you how your brain works. A very good book, which is from what a lot of this content has been taken from, is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics. He got that prize because he looked at the psychology of risk, how we understand and perceive risk. And he doesn't just talk about risk, he talks about a lot of things, and it's quite an eye-opener how your mental process works. And his research about, well, I'll talk about dual process theory, feeds into the psychology of how you view things. So as I say, there's like a short paragraph or two in both of those books. They talk about how you see things, stimulus, eye, brain. But I say I take a step back and show you how your brain actually works. So there's a little bit of an interactive bit. Don't be shy. If you're in a room, shout out what you see. If you're remote, watching this, shout out at your screen, don't worry. I just want you to say what you see. So this person is happy, yeah? We'll just go through a few, okay? Don't be shy, okay. This person is sad. Cool? This person is happy, yeah? This one's slightly different. Just shout out the answer when you get it. Is absolutely furious. I haven't stolen your shirt, don't worry. This baby is sad. Okay, this one's slightly different again. Just shout out the answer when you get it. We have a winner, 127. So what I've done there is taken you through two mental processes, the intuitive process, facial recognition, emotional state recognition, things we've all done since we were babies, growing up, understanding, it's very quick, very effortless. You didn't have to think about it, you just saw a happy person and said they were happy. Then I moved you to an attentive process where you had to physically stop and work something out. Two things happened to everybody in this room when I switched from the face to that. Your heart rate's increased, and your pupils dilated. And for those who carried on working it out, your pupils dilated for a lot longer until you solved it. Mental effort and pupil dilation are very good, go hand in hand, yeah? So when we talk about the attentive process and the intuitive process, I'm not saying either one is good or bad. I'm trying to say we want to leverage it where we can. You want to be able to recognize something that's quick and effortless, and then maybe sometimes you might want somebody to stop and have a look and work something out. I could have made that a lot easier. I could have put it in order, made it slightly more intuitive, remove what we call cognitive burden, the amount of mental effort your brain physically has to go through to work something out. Yeah? So Daniel Kahneman talks about dual process theory, and basically you have two models in your brain, the intuitive, system 1 in the literature, and the attentive, your system 2. So your intuitive is effortless. You see something, you catch a ball, you do something automatically. If, as in the case I just showed you, it breaks the rules, system 1 will say, no, I can't do it, and you'll kick it up to system 2. I switch from faces to an equation. You broke the model, switch to your attentive process. Your attentive process is, as I say, it's higher mental effort. You get physical responses. If you do something for long enough, a familiar task, an attentive task will become an intuitive task. The best example of that is driving. Remember when you first started driving, where all the controls are, trying to figure out, now you just get in the car, turn the key and off your driveway. Yeah? So, as I say, system 1 is effortless. It's very quick. But it can be error-prone to biases, which I'll talk about later. So as I said, neither one is good nor bad. We just want to leverage what we can. We okay? So how does your intuitive process, or how do you make something a bit more intuitive in your report design? Well, we leverage an intuitive process that we're all probably familiar with, reading. Yeah? In the English language in Europe, you read from left to right, top to bottom. So ideally, you want to get rid of logos and stuff in your top left, because that's the most important part of your real estate, and move your most important visual, your quick information hit, to there. So straight away you can see, when you're looking at the page, the most important thing. Now they've done dwell times, or where you look on the page and everything, and the top left-hand corner is the most important part of your real estate. So maybe you want to move, say, that important visual to your top left. Conversely, if you want to hide something, put it down your bottom right. I don't tend to put logos when I do my report design. You don't feel the need to be reminded what company you work for every time you access a report. Get that quick information visual hit. Yeah? Common theme we see again is everyone gets excited about their visuals, 3D visuals. Excel is great for all the different options, 3D visuals, pie charts, everything, where you can't access, you can't intuitively understand what's going on in front of you. What you want to do with your visual is remove distractions. You can probably see there's a number of issues here. We've got a background, that's adding cognitive burden. Perhaps if you're colorblind, colors will mix. We've got comparing contrasting colors, quite bold colors. We have down the side, we haven't formatted the axes correctly. We haven't formatted the axis at the bottom correctly. We've got buttons all over the place, title, bold, and in the middle. Again, we can leverage our intuitive process and remove the cognitive burden by removing some of these things. So here I was removing the distractions. So we've moved, for example, the title to the top left. So when you look at a visual, top left, that's your intuitive path. You're looking at something. Top left, put something there. Yeah, don't move your title over your top right or anywhere else. Move the legends to somewhere that's a bit more accessible. Format things correctly, because you're removing that amount of cognitive burden. You're making it a bit more intuitive. And here I've used, everyone heard of Gestalt theory, of visualization? Yeah. So as you can see, I've tried to get the reader, the person who's looking at the visual, to focus on the cars, and I've used a bolder color than the others, and also a thicker line, so it draws the user's attention to that visual. Yeah, any questions? We all okay? Good. Sorry, Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory of visualization. My colleague, Prathi, does a very good session on Gestalt theory about shape and form and color, how they impact your assessment of a visual, like colored dots, triangles, squares, mixing things up. Yep. Those two books, Stephen Few books and Cole Knafleck's books, do talk about Gestalt theory, about how you apply them to your visual design. So my main takeaway I want you to think about is how abstract are your numbers, and what do we mean by an abstract number? So if you sort of close your eyes and try and imagine a dot, then keep on adding dots, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dots. Where does your imagination, where does your mental process break down? It generally breaks down about 15 to 20 dots. You can't imagine anymore, or when sort of your internal visualization breaks down. So what you can do is when you're visualizing things, use an intuitive pattern. Use, for example, dice patterns. So use the little X for 5, imagine 5, then 10, then 15. It's a lot easier to visualize that. That's a very good example of something moved from an attentive process to an intuitive process when you're looking at dice. It's very interesting to see when my children were growing up, when they stopped counting the dots on the dice and started recognizing the pattern. Yeah. So we're going to talk about frequency format and how to remove that abstraction, how to make your numbers more relatable. How can you make a number more relatable to you? How can you, cognitively understand it? So what we're going to talk about is ratios. So ratios are relative frequencies, how many. Percentages are chances, how probable. And the biggest source of abstraction is a percentage. Because if you think about it, you have 100%. You're trying to visualize something that's 100, then a proportion of 100. It's very hard. I say your imagination sort of breaks down after around 15. But trying to imagine 100 of something. And intellectually, you may know that 50% is half, or 33% is a third, but it's not very relatable. It's a bit too abstract. So maybe in a visual, you want to move away from percentages to ratios, and instantly your number becomes a lot more relatable. So, as I mentioned, you intuitively understand how many a lot better than how likely. Does anyone read newspapers, adverts and stuff like that? Yeah. See media things about prostate cancer, cancer rates, stuff like that? They're all in a ratio. They say 1 in 4 people will get this disease, or so 1 in 10. It instantly becomes a lot more relatable. Yeah. We've seen this in parts manufacturers looking at their failure rates, and they move from a percentage failure rate to say 5% parts failing, they move to a ratio, and suddenly there's a lot more attention in their part failure rates because they could effectively relate to the number and effectively visualize the number. So all of a sudden, we change the reports straight away. 1 in 20. I thought it was 5%. 5% is 1 in 20. Yeah? You think because you're comparing a small number, 5, to a large number, 100, and you think, well, that's quite small. But still, you start talking in ratios, 1 in 20, 1 in 10, you can relate to it a lot more. I'd say you understand how many. Yeah? So that was move from the probability to how many can have some unintended benefits or drawbacks. So as I mentioned, an intuitive system, intuitive system 1 can be prone to errors and biases. So they did a survey, and the survey asked 2 questions. Which is the worst disease? A disease that kills 1,200 people out of every 10,000, or a disease that kills 24% of the population? Which one do you think got the most answers? The top one, because it's more relatable. People can sort of understand and relate to that number. Even though if you think about it, it's about half. A disease that kills 24% is killing 1 in 4 people. It instantly becomes a bit more relatable. It can be prone to errors and biases. Yeah. Conversely, there's a good body of evidence out there that's suggesting that in the legal world, they'll switch between ratios and percentages where they can. So, the defense law will say, look, jury, DNA will falsely match 1 in 1,000 cases. You've sort of instantly focused on the 1, forgot about the 999 that were correct. And a prosecution law will say, look, DNA will only be wrong in 0.1%, blind the jury with percentages and decimal points. So there's a very good survey which was done a few years ago with drug use through school children. So they surveyed 10,000 school children 1 year, then a few years later they surveyed 10,000 kids again. And next thing you know, the headlines in the newspapers were quite dramatic. Cocaine usage among school children had increased by 100%. Yeah? It actually gone from 1 in 10,000 to 2 in 10,000. So if you want to hide something, maybe use a percentage. Always go for a ratio. If you're of a certain age, Is there a good ratio to use? You might recognize this. 8 out of 10 owners said their cats preferred it. Whiskers. Yeah? Use the pair of 10s. You have 10. You intuitively understand 10. Our number system's based around 10s. Use a pair of 10s. If you looked at that and said 4 out of 5 cats, 80% of cats preferred it, you want to go for the 8 out of 10. Use the pair of 10s. Don't round up and down. Don't do 1.5 in 17 or 2.5 in 10. Round up where you can. You're reducing that abstraction, you're reducing that attentive process, and moving it into an intuitive number. Yeah? Does anyone remember that advert? Yeah. When we're talking about numbers as well, positive or negative context. For example, that advert wouldn't say 2 out of 10 cats refused it. 1 out of 5 cats absolutely hated it. Or you wouldn't say 20% of cats refused it. Like with parts manufacturing, you wouldn't say 19 out of 20 parts were successful. You want to say the 1 out of 20 were unsuccessful. You want to focus the viewer, focus the report user on the one that you want to direct them. When you go to the doctor, if it's a bad doctor, you'll say 1 in 10 people have complications. If it's a good doctor, they'll say 9 out of 10 people have no complications. If it's a really good doctor, you'll say 90% of people have no complications. Yeah? I finished a little bit early. Any questions? I'll give you another example of how your intuitive process can be biased. So you may have heard this question before. A bat and a ball cost £1, 10 pence. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Your intuitive process wants to say 10p. It's not. The ball is 5p. Yeah? If you think about it, you're thinking about it, if you count to 10p, don't worry. 50% of Harvard graduates in economics get the question wrong, so you're in good company. As I say, your intuitive system can be prone to errors and biases. I've got 2 minutes left.
Quick comment is, what is very interesting is that your first point about stuff being up at the top left things is that you then run into the argument between your insight analyst and your marketing team.
Yes.
And your marketing team are wanting to promote that report, especially as a consultancy, and are wanting your external users to know who the person is that they're actually working with, and are determined to have their logos up the top left-hand side. Yeah. Versus the inside people who know that's a waste of space.
Yeah, so it's a good question about the impact of sales and marketing on your report design. Try to remove corporate colours. Go for a nice, safe, neutral palette. You don't want bold colours. As you say, bold colour would direct your attention away. Or maybe you want to use a bold colour to highlight things. The feedback between sales and, some users will fight for a table where a chart will be a lot more intuitive to understand. Some users will fight for a pie chart when a column or bar chart is a lot easier to understand. I don't like pie charts. They throw you out. They draw your visual into the center. You can't take the slices and assess the comparison between the two like you can with the bar chart. So yeah, you just have to try and educate people. Try and keep reports in the same format as well. Yeah, have a descending order of granularity if you can, high level, mid-level, low level, so you're reading down, things like that. So some other good tips. 1 minute left. Any other questions?
It's very easy in Power BI to keep 20% in a card. How would you do that with 2 out of 10?
So yeah, how would you do that in Power BI? How would you change it from a percentage to a ratio? You just have to use a bit of DAX, use a mod syntax. I'm just progressing a Power BI workbook. Once I've got authorization to it, I'll post it on my GitHub. Just keep an eye on my tweets. Any other questions? Oh, crumbs, I see. Yeah, it's, nuts. Sorry, that's my feedback thing as well. It's at JHL SQL. That's time. I hope you found it informative. I hope you've learned a little bit about how your brain works. So, go away and see what's intuitive and what's attentive. Thank you.